So get this. What if a single policy memo, signed quietly in Washington, D.C., was actually the first shot in a brand new kind of global war? A war that's not fought with armies and tanks, but with code and digital assets. Today, we're going to break down a really fascinating scenario: how one U.S. executive order, aimed at fixing a domestic debt problem, could accidentally set off a massive financial showdown with China over the future of money itself. And that one sentence, it really frames this whole thing. It tells you that what the American public might have seen as just another crypto regulation, its biggest rival saw as a direct economic attack. And, well, that changes everything. So let's dive in. Let's unpack the secret strategy, China's explosive reaction, and the high-stakes timeline of how this whole conflict could escalate. Okay, so the trigger we're talking about is a hypothetical executive order from January 23, 2025. Now, on the surface, it sounded great, right? All about American leadership in digital assets. But if you dug into the actual legal language, you'd find a much, much deeper strategy, one with a very clear playbook from history. I mean, the parallel here is just, it's impossible to ignore. This 2025 order is basically a digital copy-paste of the 1933 gold confiscation. The crisis is different, sure, it's the national debt instead of the Great Depression, but the game plan is identical. You centralize a hard asset, then you devalue your own currency to basically pull off a stealth default on your debt. Right. So you've got to ask yourself, why would the US dust off a playbook that's nearly a century old? Well, the answer comes down to a mathematical crisis that is just absolutely staggering. $37 trillion. That's the US national debt. It's a number so huge it almost doesn't feel real. But the real ticking time bomb isn't even the total amount. It's the cost just to maintain it. That's the interest payment, every single year. We're talking about a number that's on track to swallow up all discretionary revenue within just a few years. The bottom line is, paying this back the old-fashioned way, it's not on the table anymore. The government needed a way out. And this lays out their escape plan perfectly. Step 1, quietly get your hands on 1 million Bitcoin. Through seizures, off-market deals, you name it. Step 2, lock it all up in a new, super secure digital Fort Knox. And then, step 3, this is the masterstroke. You just unilaterally declare that its strategic value is now $1 million per coin. Boom. You've instantly created a $1 trillion asset on your books, and you can start inflating away the real value of that $37 trillion in debt. But here's the thing. While Wall Street might be popping champagne, seeing a huge price pump, over in Beijing, they saw something completely different. They didn't see a clever financial trick. They saw an act of economic warfare designed to corner the market on the world's only truly neutral monetary asset. And this chart right here, this tells you everything you need to know about why. For decades, the entire world has run on the US dollar. It makes up a whopping 60% of all central bank reserves. China's yuan, it's not even at 3%. This imbalance is the foundation of America's global power. This power has a name: dollar hegemony. It lets the US freeze assets, impose sanctions, and basically cut entire countries off from the global financial system with the flip of a switch. For a country like China, Bitcoin represented the only real way out of that system, a neutral asset that nobody owned. And they saw the US move as a blatant attempt to monopolize that escape route. So China's back was against the wall. Their hand was totally forced. They had to either fight back hard or just accept US financial dominance for another generation. So they launched a swift, 4-part counteroffensive. First up, mining. Remember when everyone thought China had completely banned Bitcoin mining back in 2021? Well, surprise. Turns out, state-controlled operations kept humming along quietly in remote areas, secretly building up reserves. The US order was just the excuse they needed to bring this operation out of the shadows and crank it up to 11. Their new goal was incredibly ambitious: capture 25% of the entire global hash rate. They were ready to turn their huge energy surplus into a strategic Bitcoin factory, aiming to mine over 50,000 Bitcoin every single year. Okay, but mining takes time, right? And they needed to move fast. So China also started to weaponize its massive foreign currency reserves. They used state-owned companies and quiet over-the-counter trading desks in places like Hong Kong to start buying up Bitcoin without causing a panic in the market. In the amount of money they authorized for this, $30 billion, spread out over 3 years.
This was a crystal clear signal that China wasn't just testing the waters, they were all in on this new arms race.
Now for their third move, and honestly, this one was the real game changer. China already had its own digital currency, the ECNY, but it had a huge problem. Nobody trusted it. International adoption was basically zero because no other country wanted a currency that was 100% controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. So, they did something brilliant. They fixed the trust problem. By announcing that the new digital yuan would be partially backed by their growing Bitcoin reserves, they instantly made it harder, more credible money. This gave countries who are, let's say, not big fans of the US a real reason to finally jump on board. It created a legitimate challenger to the dollar system. And that brings us to the fourth and final countermeasure, which might be the most geopolitically significant move of them all. America's executive order gave China the perfect excuse to rally the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, and others, against a common enemy, an America that was trying to weaponize yet another global asset. And what this all adds up to, what their ultimate goal is a completely parallel financial system. By pooling their Bitcoin reserves together, they could create a new, neutral currency just for settling trade. This is the absolute nightmare scenario for American dominance, a world where nearly half the global economy can trade with each other without ever needing to touch a US dollar. So where is all this headed? What's the end game of this escalating race? Well, it's not a clear win for either side. Instead, it's a fundamental rewiring of the entire global financial system as we know it. So let's walk through how this could play out. 2025, that's the opening shot. The US makes its move, and China immediately mobilizes. In 2026, things accelerate. Both sides are racing to stack as much Bitcoin as they can. But 2027, that's the crisis year. The US debt bomb finally goes off, China makes its big move with the Bitcoin-backed yuan, and the dollar's dominance starts to crack. And the result? By 2028, you have a strategic stalemate, a new two-sided world order, with a Western dollar bloc and an Eastern BRICS bloc, with Bitcoin sitting right in the middle as the neutral settlement asset for everyone. And that brings us to the biggest question of all, a question that really affects every single one of us. As these global superpowers build out the infrastructure for these new, programmable, state-controlled digital currencies, what does it actually mean for you and me? At the end of the day, the currency war between nations might just end in a draw. But the technologies they're building in this race, they're here to stay, and they're going to define the next 100 years of money. So, will they lead to a more open, free financial world? Or will they give governments a level of surveillance and control we've never seen before? That is the real question this conflict leaves us with.